say a few things about the first chapter, the opening remarks of John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism. This opening chapter is not so much about the theory itself, but about the need for a theory and what a theory would be, what a moral theory is. So it doesn't tell you, it gives some hints. It mentions the principle of utility towards the end of the chapter and the importance of happiness, and a very interesting mention of Kant, a criticism of Kant, a respectful criticism of Kant, uh, and perhaps of what Mill sees as the flaw in Kant's philosophy, where he rejects consequences, impacts on happiness, and that he sees this as an internal contradiction in Kant's moral philosophy. But that's not really the subject of the chapter. The subject of the chapter is not his theory, but the need for a theory and the absence of a theory in morality. If we could say what it is that Mill is looking for in the most fundamental way, it is a criterion of right and wrong. Now, he uses other uh, related terms for this. He's looking for the foundation of morality. He's looking for the first principles of morality, or he's looking for the standard. All right. All of these things may have slightly different meanings, but they kind of point to the same thing, and it's the criterion of right and wrong, which I think is the most direct and useful. And you might say what it is that ultimately he will attempt to provide in this book is a criterion of right and wrong. What does that mean? Let's take a look at that. What is a criterion? Criterion is let's say, a standard for making a judgment. Not just a moral criterion, any criterion, a standard for making a judgment of some sort. Um, Say that we're looking at a group of animals and we want to pick out all the zebras. Okay. So we say, well, if we're going to pick out all the zebras in this group of animals, we need a criterion for judging what thing is a zebra and what thing is not. So the criterion may be true or false, but we need one to get started. So let's just say that a zebra is a let's just say that that's what we say a zebra is, and then it may be good or bad, but at least now we have a standard for picking out the zebras amongst the group of animals. Anything that appears to us to be a horse-like animal with black and white stripes will be a zebra. So we now have a criterion for recognizing a zebra. Let's say we're making bets before the beginning of a baseball season on which teams will make the World Series, and we want criteria for picking what we think will be the best teams. Criteria is just the plural of criterion. So let's just say the best teams are ones with I'm just making stuff up. I haven't watched baseball in years. Let's say that we say, well, the strongest teams will be the ones with strong left-hand pitching and a legit power hitter. Okay. So then we just look at all the teams and see which ones have those criteria, and we pick those. These are just formal examples. So criterion is a standard for making a judgment. So this is pretty easily applied to morality. What would a criterion of right and wrong be? Well, it would be a rule for judging the moral value of something, an action, a person. And that would be the basis or the standard, a foundation, a principle that we apply. So that's what he's looking for, and that's what he's going to present. It's no secret that it will be the greatest happiness principle, the one that we looked at earlier. But that will be the criterion of right and wrong. There'll be plenty of time to look and see how to apply that criterion and all the problems associated with it that Mill wants to dispense with. He wants to solve. He wants to defend the greatest happiness principle as a criterion of right and wrong. And we know what that means, right? That is, an action is good if it promotes happiness and bad if it promotes unhappiness. That's a crude way of putting it, but that's the basic idea. And that's the one that he will propose as a criterion of right and wrong. That is, we can use that as a standard. We look at any particular action, we ask ourselves what its moral value is, and we apply that principle. He recognizes that there are going to be certain problems with that. And the next chapter, after he introduces the principle, is really about dealing with objections to that. Really, the idea of what the good is and his notion that happiness, pleasure, he feels like he'll have to defend that. And that's kind of the most interesting part of the book is the second chapter. But it's this first chapter that really sets out the goal. Like, what is he doing here? And right away, one of the things, maybe the one thing that's really important, this criterion of morality, which is that by which we judge the value of all else. If you say, and about a particular action, is it good or bad? And I say, well, it's good. And you ask me, well, prove it. Well, I prove it by means of reference to the criterion. I mean, that is, if my criterion is the good is happiness and whatever promotes happiness is a good action, then in a certain sense I can prove that that action is good by reference to the criterion because the action itself promoted happiness. But then there is the question, can you prove the criterion itself? And this is where things get really problematic, and there's a whole chapter in this book talking about to what degree the greatest happiness principle can actually be proved. And here we're in elementary logic. First principles, and that's what a standard for morality or a criterion for right and wrong would be, they cannot, strictly speaking, be proved at all because they're first principles. So, as we'll see, it's problematic how you argue for or establish something like the greatest happiness principle because it's a principle. And so, classically speaking, you want that principle to be self-evident. That is, you would claim that its truth or its validity is obvious without proof, it's self-evident, but that's problematic.